Hello there. Thank you for tuning in to the very first episode of IP Wednesdays. This is a brand new vlog series produced by my firm, Lux Lumen Intellectual Property. I have been asked by several people now, what is the meaning of Lux Lumen and why did you name your firm that? Lux and lumen are units of measuring light intensity, and the light bulb is the symbol of innovation. Poetic, yes. We are based in the Washington, D.C. area, specializing in patent prosecution and counseling. Feel free to check us out at llpatent.com. Okay, enough about me. Let's talk about the PTO's AI subject matter eligibility guidance issued in July of 2024. And we are really going to dive in here. The guidance contains 3 written examples, each example having a set of sample claims for which the PTO conducted their subject matter eligibility analysis. In this episode, we will be going through each of the examples, and I'll give you what I think are the main takeaways from a practitioner standpoint. Getting right into it, here are my main takeaways. Number 1, it's not about what you claim, it's actually about what you don't claim. What's clear in the guidance is that in order to avoid a 101 rejection at the outset, it's about not reciting one of the judicial exceptions: mathematical formula, mental process, methods of organizing human activity. So practitioners sometimes get bogged down on reciting enough physical structure. We think that if we recite enough physical structure, the claim should obviously be directed to a physical structure and not an abstract idea, right? Well, that sounds right, but it's wrong. It's not the presence of physical structure or positively claiming enough structure that shields your claim from a 101 challenge. Rather, the guidance makes clear that if you recite both statutory and non-statutory subject matter in a claim, the claim is directed to non-statutory subject matter under BRI. That is clearly stated in MPEP 2106, and we will see that in these examples, and being more narrow can hurt you because you've ended up claiming more non-statutory subject matter. But you have a software invention and you need to claim some non-statutory subject matter in order to overcome 102 and 103. So what do? Before we get into that, second takeaway. You will see from these examples that sometimes whether a limitation is an abstract idea comes down to breadth. The PTO is looking for a particular way to achieve a particular solution. And that really goes to the second step 2, prong 2, which is the practical application analysis. Third takeaway, it's important to remember that these sample claims and their corresponding backgrounds are all hypothetical. All the sample claims in the backgrounds that came with the 2019 PEG, also all hypothetical. These examples aren't meant to be taken as doctrine, but rather they should be used for illustrative purposes for us to see how the PTO applies the laws to the facts, namely the law of 101 and BRI to the hypothetical facts of a particular claim set. And final takeaway, BRI analysis is very prominent in these examples. They start off every claim set with how BRI is applied. We as practitioners should be looking for opportunities to argue the examiner's application of BRI when suitable. And here's a big issue here. BRI requires claim interpretation in light of the specification, an entire specification. But what you see in these examples is application of BRI to hypothetical claims based on hypothetical backgrounds that are clearly not complete disclosures. There are no exemplary embodiments, no drawings. Rather, you have to remember that these examples were written specifically for arriving at these outcomes that you're going to see for illustrative purposes. So just a quick review of major points in section 2106 of the MPEP, which is the section on subject matter eligibility, that we see this really prevalent in these examples. Again, if you have a claim that contains both statutory and non-statutory subject matter, the claim is directed to non-statutory subject matter by default. Claiming more structure or statutory subject matter does not save you. What you need is practical applications such as a technological improvement. And what they're looking for with the technological improvement is a particular solution or a particular way of achieving a desired outcome. And this is based on McCrow. Example 47, Claim 1, the first example. This claim is the only example in which eligibility is found because the claim did not contain any judicial exception or non-statutory subject matter. It's just pure statutory subject matter. Here's what you should take away from this sample claim. The broadest reasonable interpretation of the claimed ANN requires hardware because the claimed ASIC is a physical circuit. Also, the microprocessor and memory are hardware and not judicial exceptions in this claim. I've seen examiners call these components part of the human mind. Your brain can be a microprocessor and you have a memory. But here, the microprocessor and the memory are claimed as part of a circuit. Therefore, it's hardware. Okay, claim 2, not eligible. Steps B and B to C are considered mathematical concept. Steps D to F are considered mental process. The part I want to highlight is step C of this method claim, which is the training part. The analysis really honed in on training based on an algorithm, and the claim requires training by a backpropagation algorithm or a gradient descent algorithm. And these algorithms are known in the machine learning art. So what should we take away? Well, I don't know if we should be using the term algorithm anywhere in our claims or disclosure. It seems like it's a trigger word. Also, I've crossed out by a computer in this claim to illustrate that the PTO has crossed it out in their minds. By a computer, it just wasn't afforded patentable weight in this claim. So claim 3 is another example of a method claim using an ANN. Here you have a training based on an algorithm is deemed directed to a mathematical concept here too, and the detecting and the determining steps are capable of being performed in the human mind. But you also have practical application by way of a technological improvement. The way the background for this sample was written was that steps D to F allow for certain technological improvements in detecting malicious network packets efficiently. So technological improvement isn't my favorite doctrine, and I realize that we all have to live with it under the current 101 regime. But this sample actually illustrates one of the reasons why I don't particularly like having to use technological improvement. And if you can see it, it's actually the term malicious network packets. You're detecting a source address associated with malicious network packets and then dropping the malicious network packets in real time. Depending on how you've defined malicious network packets in your spec, I think there could be a detection issue when it comes to enforcing this particular claim. A lot of times, technological improvements end up involving third-party action. You need to watch out if it does, because you might overcome 101, but claiming technological improvement may cause other issues to arise when it comes to enforcing your claim. So here's a tip. If you find yourself in the situation in which the examiner wants you to put something like this in your claim to have practical application, have the interview. Explain to them you'll have a detection enforcement issue with this kind of claiming, and try to find a workaround. Many times examiners will try to work with you. So something to consider. Does example 47 conflict with example 39 of the 2019 PEG? Sometimes you hear that example 39 of the previous guidance is no longer effectively used to overcome 101 rejections, and that the reason seems to be attributed to example 47 of this new guidance. I'm not totally sure if that's the case. I can't claim to know why example 39 seemed to have lost its effectiveness, but the method claims in example 47 are use claims with a training step, whereas example 39 is a training claim comprising multiple steps. So I don't think they necessarily conflict. If you find that example 39 isn't as useful as it was in the past, this is another opportunity to have an interview with the examiner arguing example 39 and how it applies to your claim. Should the examiner not seem convinced, ask him why in real time, and if it's in fact due to the new examples, distinguish between your cases. So in claim 2 of this example, the USPTO determined that the steps F and G provide a practical application by means of a technological improvement. Their reasoning was pretty cut and dry, so I won't get into it. What I did find interesting about this example was that the discussion did go into some lengths to state that step G was not a mathematical concept. Even though the disclosure explains that stitching could be performed by overlap add math method, which is a mathematical operation, the claim recites no details of how the stitching is performed, the guidance says. Additionally, while the claim recites variables, variables are not on their own mathematical relationships, formulas, or calculations. Therefore, the combining step is merely based on or involves a mathematical concept but does not recite a mathematical concept. Well, that's interesting because previously we saw that reciting a backpropagation algorithm or a gradient descent algorithm meant the claim recited a mathematical concept. But when you generally recite stitching, which could involve math, it might not, but you're general enough that your disclosure does not restrict the step of stitching to a mathematical calculation, that is not math. So this is an example when going broad helps. Generally claiming stitching and not restricting the stitching to a method of mathematical calculation, even though they were not specific as to what other methods could be used, still save this limitation from being directed to a mathematical concept. So now on to claim 3. Let's again pay attention to what they say is directed to a mathematical concept and what's not. According to the guidance, Step B requires converting a time frequency representation of a mixed speech signal into embeddings in a feature space as a function of the mixed speech signal, which the guidance says is a mathematical equation written in text format. Step C requires clustering the embeddings by a k-means clustering algorithm, which the guidance says is a mathematical calculation, k-means clustering algorithm. Step D contains mask clusters by applying binary masks to the clusters. And the guidance says this is also a mathematical calculation. So this example is a little worrisome to me because using a DNN, using k-means clustering algorithm, or applying binary masks, those are all kind of well-known, common machine learning data processing methods, along with backpropagation and gradient descent, which we saw in a previous claim. So that's the thing with these hypothetical claims. When you really take a close look and take a step back also, it's very clear that they all seem to have a little bit of novelty and obviousness issues with them. These claims might not be directed to novel, non-obvious subject matter, which kind of makes sense now that you think about it because the PTO isn't back there inventing novel features to claim. They are also using what appears to be common limitations seen in AI claims and putting them together for illustrative purposes. But because they are known and common, there's no other way to describe these methods. So if you're claiming these features, it looks like the PTO does consider these to be mathematical concepts. And this is where we see that well-understood routine conventional idea creep its way into the guidance, even though it's never specifically mentioned. I encourage you then to either look for practical application, obviously, or do what we saw with the previous example, which is to claim broadly. By the way, steps E and F in this claim were found to recite technological improvements. Pretty cut and dry again, and is based on the spec the way it was written. Also, they were deemed to not recite mathematical concepts because these steps don't require mathematical formulas, calculations, or relationships. So I feel like this phrase we should be using in our arguments when traversing a 101 rejection. The step of blah blah doesn't require mathematical formulas, calculations, or relationships, and therefore it doesn't recite a mathematical concept. See example 49 of the guidance. The final example we see AI claims in the field of life sciences. The background states that the applicant invented a new drug, Compound X, for treating glaucoma, and also filed an application describing how Compound X can be topically administered in the eye form after microstent implant surgery. So the first claim is really about diagnosing a patient by assessing the risk for glaucoma using AI. That's the bulk of this claim, and it's also recited in steps A and B. It's a diagnosis claim, unfortunately. So claim 1 was deemed to be directed to math, a mental process, and a law of nature because determining the risk of glaucoma was based on the relationship between phenotype and genotype. Yeah, diagnosis claims, kiss of death. Then you get into claim 2, eligible. Claim 2 requires administering the compound, which is effectively positively claimed here. And the background states that Compound X is novel and new and is not part of a common course of treatment. So this is what they're saying. The AI part isn't eligible, but positively claiming the compound that's novel, yeah, that's eligible. So does the guidance provide actual guidance for AI subject matter eligibility? Yes, I believe so. We do see guidance and explanation on what's deemed to be mathematical concepts, and it strongly appears that commonly used or known machine learning techniques are mathematical concepts under the guidance. All I can say is that we should try to get a practical application with these features. Is there a particular way for a particular solution or a technological improvement? And if you can, go broad. Describe your specification in a way that doesn't restrict steps or processes to requiring mathematical formulas or algorithms. It's really much harder than you think. And are the examples finally hostile to AI or machine learning claims? I don't know about hostile, but I think they are flawed because they are hypothetical claims and not real-world examples. Some are obviously not patentable claims due to 102 and 103 issues, but also the corresponding backgrounds that are meant to serve as disclosures are also hypothetical and not detailed descriptions. So we end up looking at AI and machine learning features out of context of a true claim presentation with these examples. And therefore, they are flawed, in my opinion. Anyway, thank you very much for tuning in. The next episode of IP Wednesdays will be on the AI Inventorship Guidance. Hope to see you there. Thank you. Bye.